there was 3 directors in this film, actually. The third one was a German independent director called Tom Tykwer. But according to them, the film is an exploration of how the actions of individual lives impact one another in the past, present, and future. As one soul is shaped from a killer to a hero, and an act of kindness ripples across the centuries to inspire a revolution. So that's how they describe it. And really, that really does sum up the film, I guess. But of course, the film is so much more than that. You know, there's so much more going on than just that. And every concept or every how can I put this? Every little detail in the film, you know, it has depth to it. Every plot device, every theme, every meme has incredible depth to it that can be looked at and interpreted and perceived on multiple angles, and that has multiple levels of meaning, significance. And I think for that reason, I would definitely recommend that people watch the film before maybe, you know, listening to the rest of this interview, because I don't think it's really going to make much sense unless you've seen the film.
Yes. Cloud Atlas indeed has, it's interconnected, as any good movie is with its themes. The themes all tie in together and they weave in and out. Hugo Weaving in and out.
Yeah. Weaving, yep, that's right. Yep.
Geez, just that name we could get into, but
yeah. I know, yeah.
But what are some of the main themes here that really might be worth pointing out, or maybe some that folks would have missed if they watched the film?
Yeah, well, I think the film was really popular, at least amongst certain demographics or people with certain tastes anyway. It's very similar to the film The Fountain. If people have seen the film The Fountain, it's basically a film where you've got 3 time periods spanning roughly, I think it's 1,000 years or maybe 1,500 years, and one love story that continues across, you know, 1,500 years through the reincarnation of 2 souls in different lifetimes, and that's basically the same theme as Cloud Atlas. I think what most people will see in that film is predominantly a love story, or at least a number of love stories. There are sort of 2 predominant love stories throughout the film that sort of start, 500 years in the past and through multiple lifetimes, and sort of recurring themes continue into the present and hundreds of years into the future. And of course, one of the main quotes from the film, from the Sonmi character, who is a clone, who's been living in Korea, approximately 200 years in the future. She says, "Our lives are not our own. From womb to tomb, we are bound to others, past and present, and by each crime and every kindness, we birth our future." And I think that was one of the main themes of the film, and that's what most people, I think, will be looking at when they see Cloud Atlas, is the whole idea of a love story spanning, you know, hundreds of years, and the concept of reincarnation and karma and consequence and all of those types of themes. Everything being connected, everything being a result of something that's come before it. One event in the future being inspired by an event 500 years in the past. You know, it's a lot of different themes, a lot of different plays on these ideas. But I think the whole idea of a love story that spans across the centuries is what most people will get from that film. But there's a lot more. There's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah,
definitely.
And love stories can go. You know, it's funny, in popular music especially, I've noticed this concept is that a love song, a typical love song you'll hear, it's not, if you listen to it in the right way, it's not actually just like the male singer or maybe female singer, whoever it is, a male like singing to a female that he loves. It's actually the singer singing to like his God, and kind of like this realization of like this spiritual realization, this sort of like weird internal alchemical love song. I've noticed that with a lot of love songs, and if you listen to them the right way, they've got a lot of like symbolic language and things like that. And certainly if we're talking about a Wachowski film, it's loaded with alchemical symbolism and things like this? Or what sort of little esoteric tidbits and symbols might we find in this film?
Oh, well, I mean, I'm still uncovering them. So, I mean, I can point out a few and the sort of the parts of the film and the themes that I've focused in on personally in this. But of course, I'm going to watch the film again and probably again after that, and I'm sure that I'll come across more as I watch it. But I think some of the things that stood out to me were the whole idea of a cycle, an age, the beginning and the end sort of coexisting at the same time. The whole idea of revolution and evolution. I mean, the film starts out in 1843 in the Pacific Islands, in the Chatham Islands, actually, which is not far from where I'm from. And it's basically a bunch of white aristocrats who are running a slave trade. They're dealing with the Moriori tribes, who are cannibals. And so you've got this sort of setting at the beginning where you've got these cannibals on a Pacific island, and it ends in the same way. At the very final, well, the most far forward futuristic scene in the film is again comes back to the Pacific Islands and again comes back down to cannibalism again. And so the film starts basically sort of at the dawn of the Industrial Revolution and ends post-apocalyptic. It ends in a post-apocalyptic setting, going back down to cannibalism again and back down to sort of a pre-industrial, almost pre-agricultural setting. So you've got the idea of a whole age, a whole cycle, and within that theme, or alongside that theme, you also have the idea, of course, of a new religion, of a revolution, of a new age, and of a new religion. And the Sonmi character, who is a clone in Korea, and as I said before, I think roughly 200 years in the future, she basically is inspired by something she sees in the past. Well, something she witnesses a video recording of something sort of really, what's the word I'm looking for here? Something inconsequential, which to her has great meaning and inspires her to lead a revolution. And she basically becomes the sort of a female goddess for future generations. And I don't think a lot of people picked up on that, the fact that you've got a clone, an engineered being, actually becoming the leader or the icon of a new religion for a new age. And it's interesting because her name is Sonmia 451. And if you disregard the numbers for a moment and just look at the word Sonmi, and she's referred, historically as Sonmi. I think her real name is Sonmia, but other people refer to her in the film as Sonmi. Either way, you've got the words son in there. So you've got the son, S-O-N, the son of man, man's creation. You also have the sun as in the rising sun, which was typically worshipped and was the sort of I suppose both in exoteric and in exoteric, religions was worshipped. And you can play around with the words Sonmia, and then you can get things like I am sun. I am the sun, I am the light. I'm also the sun, the product, the creation of mankind. So there's a lot of that stuff going on. And in one of these future scenes, in post-apocalyptic Hawaii, and I think it's 2321 or something like that, you've got this group of sort of pre-industrial tribal people who all worship Sonmi, and the priestesses actually have a sun tattooed on their forehead, the rising sun, which they associate with Sonmi. So you've got, I think that was one of the things that stood out to me most in terms of symbolism, was the idea of a clone being a goddess and being associated with the sun. Yeah.
Yeah, well, as Neo is the savior, Christ-like character of the Matrix, this Sonmia is the same thing in this film. Yeah, the
right.
sun. Yeah. I'm sorry. No. Go ahead.
It's interesting because there are some interesting relationships there as well when you think about the correlation between the Neo character in the Matrix and Sonmi in Cloud Atlas, and I'm sure we can go into this in further detail later on. But it's interesting because both characters are kind of they're basically just nobodies. They're sort of, just people who are working away in the system. They're part of a servant class, they're sort of totally oblivious as to what's going on around them. And then they have some kind of awakening experience, and with Neo in the Matrix, he meets Morpheus, and Morpheus unplugs him, and he wakes up, so to speak, Yeah. And in Cloud Atlas, the Sonmi character has a similar experience, where she's basically just an automaton, but is inspired by the words of another one of her clones to start thinking independently and to start asking questions, which leads her to, greater, bigger and better things, and leads her to meet the leader of a resistance movement who wants to help her and save her, and who in turn, just like the Matrix, shows her the true reality that she's living in, the truth of her own existence, and of the truth of the world, so to speak, as well.
Yeah.
So that's another correlation there, which I thought was quite interesting.
Yeah, it's also interesting that she's a synthetic being, and also that she's female. So female synthetic being. It's the significance of that.
Yeah, definitely. I think. She is female, definitely, and she doesn't look particularly androgynous. But I still got, I don't know, the whole idea of I think you have to see the film really, but I sort of got an androgynous feel from it in some way.
Absolutely, yeah, no doubt about it.
Yeah, and she was sort of like the, what do you want to call it? The alchemical hermaphroditic symbol for
the sort of the conjunction of male and female creative principles to make a more divine creature.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah. The alchemical marriage. Yeah. So yeah, that was definitely a very, very powerful theme, I thought, and which was one of the things I've concentrated most on the film. I think when I'm analyzing it is looking at that particular idea, because I think that is extremely powerful, and I think it's extremely interesting, and I think it says a lot about the particular beliefs of certain groups of people, and perhaps the Wachowskis as well.
Yeah, well, yeah, definitely, they're the ones making the movie for sure. So there's whenever anybody's watching a movie, it's important to think about who made the movie, who wrote it, like why they might have put the themes in there. But back to this character, the coming of a Messiah for a new age. That's typically this Messiah, son, god, or goddess character comes to ring in a new age and bring a new way of doing things. So that's exactly what's going on here, huh?
Yeah, that's right. She's the first. Well, they call her, the clones are called fabricants in this setting, and she's the first. Well, I think actually, technically, she's the second in this film. She's the second fabricant to think independently. She has a friend who inspires her to think independently, and technically, this friend of hers was the first one to think independently, and she was killed because she basically decided to rebel against her bosses, and that act of rebellion, despite its danger, inspired Sonmi. Another interesting thing is in the film, and I only got this after rewatching it again, is that the whole idea of a free-willed, well, at least a clone that has the idea to think, that has the ability to think independently, that was not an accident. I think most people watching that film and looking at its face value would see that as some kind of, and I think the way it's presented in the film as well is, basically Sonmi was a spirit, some kind of, I think you might refer to it as Christ consciousness, that whole idea. She was a spirit or a soul who basically inherited or manifested into the body of a clone, and that was why the clone was able to think, and think with free will and to act and to rebel. But it's actually revealed in the film that both Sonmi and her friend who inspired her to rebel were actually an experiment by a resistance movement called the Union.